My name is William, and today we have the second part of our NBA predictions video. We have the Western Conference. So, before we get into this, how many teams do we have competing for a playoff spot in your opinion?
I think that realistically we have about 9 or 10, but I think that there are two more teams that are outside the top 10 seeds that really want to fight for a playoff spot and that were in the bubble last year. And I'm not going to spoil those two teams. We'll get to it, at least in my opinion. But I think that the Western Conference is so much more competitive than the East, and I think that this episode is going to be a lot of fun because we do have some disagreement here and there.
Yes, we do. And we'll start it off with our 15 seed. You have the Oklahoma City Thunder. I have the Sacramento Kings. Tell me why the Thunder are the worst team in the West this year.
I don't think that the Thunders are they're not as bad of a team as what people are making them out to be. So I just want to start that off first. But when you're playing in a conference like the Western Conference is today, and when you're playing in a division specifically with Dallas with Luka, San Antonio with their underrated young core, Memphis who's just hungry, and then Houston, I think that Harden's going to be here long term for the year. It's tough for them to come out on top, and I think just unfortunately they fall to 15 because they really don't have the depth or experience that it takes to kind of be in that tier of teams that made it to the bubble last year but realistically won't get a playoff spot, that 11 and 12 seed that I was talking about. They do have Shea, who will put up some insane stats. He's such a great player. I know me and you like him a lot, and he's going to have a great year. They have Dort, and I want to see how his offensive game progresses because we know how good he is on defense. And then they have guys like Frank Jackson, who they just traded for, who you like being a Duke and Pels fan. They have Hamidou Diallo, who's very athletic. They have Terrence Ferguson, I think, too. Or did he get traded? I think he's still there. And then they have a couple other guys. But this team is young, and I think they're more interested in embracing the tank, especially for this year. In yesterday's episode, we talked about Detroit trying to embrace the tank and just liquidating to get these generational players in the 2021 class. And I think that there are four, in my eyes, that will, have all NBA level potential. And I think OKC, with no fans, they've embraced the tank. They understand the direction, and they understand the reward that they can get if they get the number one pick, which could be Cade Cunningham, who is just an insane all-around player, Jalen Green, who has one of the highest ceilings that I've seen in the last couple drafts. There is Evan Mobley, who's such a versatile center, Jonathan Kuminga, who, in my opinion, he at a minimum could be a Jaylen Brown type player, and on a maximum be a Kawhi Leonard type player. So they understand how generational this draft class is. They understand time to tank, and because of that, I see them as a 15 seed.
My problem with having them that low, and I could see them easily being a 15 seed because of the embracement of the tank, but they still have Al Horford and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on this roster. And I know Horford probably a contender to be traded by the deadline if they're really going to embrace the tank. But with those two players, they have two legitimate players to play around this season, and they have two solid vets, which will probably get traded, as I said earlier, in George Hill and Trevor Ariza. But they've got Dort, Jackson, Diallo, as well as two legitimate players, and I think Shai is probably a top 15 player in the West. Maybe a top 10 player in the West. Like Shai is really, really good.
Yes,
and I think that having a whole team to himself is really going to help him thrive and become a great player. He's not going to have to this team was the 5 seed last year, and I know they lost Chris Paul and Steven Adams, but they're not incredibly bad. They are not going to be the 5 seed, but I don't think they're going to be the 15 seed. they will have to fully sell to be the 15 seed because this team is more talented than other teams in the West. There, there's a lot of teams that don't have the upper echelon type players like Horford and Shai, and I think that they have the willpower to bring them up to a level above some other pretty bad teams, in my opinion, or one bad team, in my opinion, in the West.
So, there are three players in particular that I want to talk about on this team that we haven't touched yet. First of all, Darius Baisley. He was a guy that LeBron mentored. He didn't actually go to college. He had that whole New Balance thing. And last year, as a rookie in the bubble, he was putting up like 15 points a game, pretty solid defense, pretty solid efficiency too. He's going to be starting at power forward as of right now. They'll put Horford at center and Muscala off the bench. Do you think that he could have a second year kind of breakout?
I think he could. I think he's going to be afforded the opportunity to have a season that he can develop in. And I think that the Thunder allowing him to have minutes and have starting minutes is going to be really impactful for his career and putting him in a position where he's going to be more successful because Horford's a better power forward than he is a center. They're
Agreed.
moving him to accommodate for his development, and that's something that's really, really deserves high praise. So I just forgot to mention Baisley, so that's on me too. But I just think this team is too talented to be the 15 seed.
Mm. I do think that they will sell a bit at the deadline. George Hill is such a efficient player and a pretty good playmaker that when it comes playoff time, they're going to be contenders, in my opinion, lining up at the door for him. He led the NBA in 3-point percentage, right? Last
Mm-hmm.
year. And he's just a great all around scorer and he can play make. He's a really good backup point guard. So I think that they'll sell him at the deadline when his value is high. And that will accommodate for Theo Maledon, who this time last year, was a projected top 10 pick. He kind of slipped, but in the preseason, we've seen that EuroLeague experience we've seen how that EuroLeague experience has translated so well to the NBA. He's been making the right passes, he's been taking the right shots, he's been rebounding well, and I think that Maledon can kind of be that second round sleeper for the year.
That's a fair point. I'll go into my 15 seed. I have the Sacramento Kings. So I don't think this is really a diss on the Kings as a whole, saying they're the 15th seed. I think this is really a praise to the whole conference and the state of how great the Western Conference is, where a team led by Fox, Buddy Hield, and Marvin Bagley can be a 15 seed. They've got a lot of other solid players around them. Barnes, you don't like him, but they have Hassan Whiteside or Sean Holmes.
I like Holmes.
But the thing is that the style of play is not aided by the coach. Luke Walton doesn't fit with these group of guys, and he's not adapting to this group of guys. And I think that this is really limiting them as a team. And I think it's no secret that Buddy Hield wants gone. And I think that this team just isn't mentally ready or mentally on par with the other 14 teams in the West. And I think that this is going to be a season where they're just going to say, you know what, rebuild, reload, and they'll have a really good excuse to fire Luke Walton at the end of the year because I don't think he's a bad coach. I just think it's a terrible fit for the players that they have. And I just think that the attitude around this team isn't great. I mean, clearly this team is not the 15th best roster or 15th worst roster in the conference, but I just think this team's fit and this team's mentality is going to hold them back.
Yeah, I don't have Sacramento much higher. I have them at like 13. So it's not like I have Sacramento as a number 5 seed or anything. It's not that big of a take to have them at 15. But yeah, I agree with you. This team plays with pace. This team needs pace and energy to actually have success. We saw that one year when De'Aaron kind of broke out in his sophomore year. You know why he was so good? You know why Sacramento was being hyped up as a finally a actual good team with a good year? It's that they played with the highest pace in the NBA. They had the most offensive possessions. And it might have not been the most efficient style of basketball, but it worked. It was getting Buddy Hield and at the time Bogdan Bogdanovich open. It was opening up lanes for De'Aaron Fox. It was truly showing how De'Aaron can be a leader and be a playmaker. But when you have Luke Walton, who plays at a much slower pace, and when Sacramento ranks in the bottom 5 in the league in pace, then this like slowed down game doesn't work for De'Aaron Fox, who thrives in transition, who wants to play make more in the full court than the half court. And so I totally agree with you. I think Luke Walton is gone. And I don't even think he's that good of a coach, to be very honest with you.
He's
But
average. He's fine. He's serviceable.
he's okay, but I guess for you having Alvin Gentry, anything's better than Alvin Gentry. But do you think Buddy Hield will be gone by the deadline? Because I'd really like to see more minutes out of Tyrese Halliburton.
I would too. I think the problem is that there's not a lot of teams that are in desperate need of a two or a pure two, because that Buddy Hield is a pure two. He's not going to play the three. He's definitely not going to play the one. And
No.
I think that his value might be tanked because we know Walton loves to ride the hot hand. And I think that's a really good thing as a coach is he rides the hot hand. When Bogdan was hot, Bogdan got all the minutes at the two and Hield could ride the bench a little bit. And when Hield was hot, Bogdan was on the bench. I think that's something that was really good as a coach that he did. But the loss of Bogdan and I think the rise of Halliburton, I think they kind of offset and Buddy might find himself on the bench a little bit. And I think that could cause a little bit of drop in value. And I think that I just don't know who's in the market for two. Maybe the only real team that I could think of picking back up with the Capitals probably New Orleans, but they don't. The only real two they have is JJ Redick, and the fact is that they want to run 2 point guards. So I just don't see that really being a great fit. And I can't really think of any other teams that desperately
And I like
needed
JJ.
two.
I like JJ Redick more on the Pelicans than Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield might be a little bit better, but actually, I don't even think he's that. I don't think he even is better. JJ Redick's a better leader too,
And a much
and
better
I
shooter. Like I
much
know
better.
Buddy's a great shooter, but just JJ's on a different
Mm-hmm.
level.
Yeah. Now, Buddy is a good shooter, a very good shooter. I think I'd put him at top 5. It's and sometimes he looks like a top 5 shooter in the league. But given the fact that he's making $20 million a year for a guy that is such a one trick pony, and for someone with that much of an inflated ego at times, I don't really know if it's worth it given his age too.
I think one trade destination that could possibly work would be Golden State.
For Wiggins, maybe.
For Wiggins, probably would be a similar type deal. I think that would be probably the best deal they could make because he's an adequate Klay Thompson replacement. You
Yeah.
put
Mm-hmm.
you put Oubre back in his now position at the 3, Draymond at the 4, Wiseman at the 5. I think that's probably the most realistic trade partner. But I don't see any teams really competing or contending that need one because Lakers don't have the capital, Clippers don't have the space.
If Milwaukee could somehow work out some kind of cap space, do you think that they can make a push for Buddy Hield?
I think
Because that would
so.
tremendously benefit Giannis. I just don't think it would work very well defensively.
One, I don't think they have the capital. They spent
Yeah.
a lot of it to get Drew Holiday, and I think that they clearly wanted to get Bogdan. They clearly thought they had an interest in bringing in a pure two. So I think that there's interest there, but I just don't see the value and capital being on the same scale that
Yeah, especially the only real asset that they could give up was who they were planning on giving up for Bogdan, which was Steven Chenzo.
DiVincenzo.
Yeah. But if Wiggins was on Sacramento, that would make me so mad just because of just Tyrese Halliburton. I really love the way he's played. And in these preseason games, he's been killing it. He's really been.
I don't think it would interfere too much. You just play Wiggins at the 3.
But there's Harrison Barnes there.
Yeah, you can put Barnes at the 4 and play Bagley or Sean at the 5.
There's a bit of a logjam in the front court
They're
because
a big log jam in the front court.
there's Barnes, there's Bagley, and you need to give Bagley minutes. There's Bielitsa, that's how you say it? Yeah.
Bielitsa.
And he's actually a good shooter too. You have Rashawn Holmes, who I like a lot, and then Hassan Whiteside, and Frank Kaminsky, and Jabari Parker, and they're all going to demand minutes. So they kind of need to even it out. If you liquidate a few of those front court players and try to work the backcourt a little bit for players that can, come behind De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton, that would benefit them well.
Well, moving on, I think we spent a little bit too much time talking about the Sacramento Kings. Let's move on to the San Antonio Spurs. I have them at 14. You have them at 13. Not much of a discrepancy there. Um, can could Pop lead this team at all to the playoffs? Is there a chance that Pop could do that?
I honestly think that he could. I think that DeRozan, I really wanted them to kind of blow it all up with DeRozan and Aldridge, but DeRozan has been playing well in these preseason games, and he's shown his commitment to actually making the three and opening up passing lanes for Dejounte and Lonnie Walker. And I think that's his young core is really nice. You have Dejounte Murray, who is a lockdown defender and whose shot is improving as well. Then Derek White, who he's not the most consistent at times, but he can drop some buckets. He can dish out dimes and he can defend at a moderately high level. And then Lonnie Walker, who I don't want to talk about too much just because it'll take a couple hours to kind of for me to give my real input on Lonnie Walker. But long arms, freak athlete, can score at all three levels. He played point guard in college, so he has playmaking potential. And then with that long arm and that really nice frame, he can defend and jump passing lanes. So if he finally gets some minutes that he deserves, then I will be really, really happy. And then at the same time, there's Keldon Johnson, who really is flying, who's really flown under the radar. He was pretty good at Kentucky, and I think that he's pretty strong too. So he'll get minutes. There's Devin Vassell, who has just he's looked like an all defense level player in the preseason as a rookie.
And not to mention Derek White and Lucas Samanic.
Samanic too. Oh, Jakob Pertl, who is actually a very good defender, and the impact metrics really, really favor Pertl's defense. So there is a young core here. A little bit of a logjam at the wings with Murray, White. One of them could play point, and then Walker, Johnson,
DeRozan.
and DeRozan, and Vassell. But I think that if they give one or two of them up, preferably Johnson and DeRozan, and let Walker and Vassell go 2 and 3, and then they, get rid of Aldridge and his contract, then this team is built for the future, and with Pop's knowledge and his experience, he could maybe push them into the playoffs because this was a bubble team.
Mm-hmm. So I don't disagree with you there. I think their ceiling realistically is the 8 or 9 seed, probably more likely the 9 seed. It would probably take more of a miracle to get the 8 seed considering the strength of the Western Conference this year. But this team is not going to be a pushover. I think 14 is a bit harsh, but you just look at this Western Conference from top to bottom, and it's super competitive. There's no real slouch here, in my opinion. I don't think there's any team here that you go, oh, that's the New York Knicks from 2 years ago. Oh, that's the tanking 76ers. There's really no team here that stands out as, oh, this team's garbage. So moving on to your 14 seed, I saved this one a little bit for later because I have them as my 11 seed. We have a little bit of a discrepancy here. Minnesota Timberwolves. Why is a team with D'Lo, and I'm not saying that I'm a big fan of the Timberwolves. I'm just saying, why is a team with D'Lo and Cat so low in this conference?
I think that this team on paper looks like a playoff team. D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Josh Okogie, Jake Layman, and Karl Anthony Towns. Plus Anthony Edwards, Ricky Rubio, Jarrett Culver, Hernan Gomez. But they are paper thin at that front court. In the front court, besides Towns, no one else is really a viable starter.
They don't have a single center besides Towns from the roster because,
yeah,
or anyone above 7. Like their tallest player is Cat at 6'11", and their next tallest guy is 6'9".
Ed Davis.
Well, Davis this year, Naz.
Yeah. Oh,
Naz Reid.
Big Jelly. And then at the wing position, you question the development here. You have Malik Beasley, who played very well in Minnesota after coming from Denver. Anthony Edwards, the number 1 overall pick, who has the potential to not become Dwayne Wade, but like a Walmart Dwayne Wade. And then Josh Okogie, who me and you love, just seeing that guy in college and seeing how good he can be on defense. He's there too. He's a freak. And then Jarrett Culver, who was your number 6 pick, and I think when he
Traded
was
up for,
coming out of
right?
college, yeah, they traded up for him, and we had him as like Jimmy Butler type potential. We weren't screwing around with this guy. We loved him. So these are 4 young guys that need minutes, and they're all going to be fighting for it. And I think that's going to create some kind of discrepancy in the locker room. They're going to have to trade 1 or 2 of these guys away. And then D'Lo, defensively, he's not quite there yet, especially with Cat. So I think that a lot of teams will kind of feast on them just because of their defensive weaknesses.
And then,
Obviously,
yeah, go ahead.
oh yeah, they're, as you said, they're paper thin on the inside. So when you're going up against a team like Philly, for example, with Embiid, or Miami, or Milwaukee with Bam and Giannis, respectively, it's going to be tough to, you know, manage this because Karl Anthony Towns is not a defensive center, and Jake Layman is not going to, should not, yeah, he just should not be like guarding Giannis. Like, that's absurd. That's absurd.
My problem with this team is matchup. I just don't see how they match up to a lot of these teams in the Western Conference because they have no defense in the interior at all. I think if you wanted to get interior, you played Nasby at the 4, but he's really raw and he has a lot of developing to do if you want him to be a viable player. You're going to be probably relying on Hernan Gomez for a lot of minutes early in the season, and then your best defensive players are Akogi and Culver, and they're not going to see the minutes with D'Lo and Anthony Edwards on the floor. So one of them probably going to be dealt. They're going to be losing a lot of defense. Malik Beasley's probably going to have to go, even though he's been playing really well because of this young talent bottleneck at the backcourt positions, and I just think that they're going to be in the bottom feeders of the West. The 5 teams that are like, we can play well, but we're not going to make the playoffs. Like, I think there's 5 teams that have no shot at making the playoffs. And that's going to be, there are 5 teams we're talking about coming up here. So moving on to our next bottom feeder, it's going to be the Memphis Grizzlies, right? The last bottom 5 team?
Yeah.
I had them at 13. You have them at 11.
Yeah, but we did have the same bottom 5 teams. I think we can agree on that. They just might not be in the same order, but they're all pretty close in record. I think within 10 games of each other. But yeah, Aaron Jackson's injury was pretty brutal, and he's going to be back, I think, by late January, but he's really going to be back in his old form by February. And I'm not saying Jaren Jackson's bad at all. I love Jaren Jackson. He has all NBA potential, but he's still pretty raw and has some development to do, especially with like foul trouble. But then outside of Jaren Jackson and maybe Valanciunas, this team is kind of thin on the interior. And besides John Morant, who is just spectacular, Dylan Brooks and Brandon Clark, who are great too, how much other offense can this team generate? And while I think that they could kind of surprise us again and maybe make a playoff push, I just don't see that happening this year. With the injury, the lack of depth, and the fact that this team is still young and they need to take 1 or 2 more years to fully develop into their proper form.
And just looking at this roster, I personally think this is the second least deep team in the West. The only team that has less depth in them is the Thunder. Then you look at the Thunder, personally, I think they have more talent. I think Shai currently is in a better state than Ja is.
Yeah.
I think right now, especially with health, Al Horford is much better than Jaren Jackson.
I wouldn't say much. But
well, Jaren Jackson's not playing the first couple of months.
Okay, yeah. But like at this stage, yes. Yes.
So it's going to take months for Jaren Jackson to reach the same level as Al Horford. So I just think that this team is paper thin. And you look at this team, Valanciunas, Clark are solid, but for those first couple of months before the All-Star break, John Morant is going to have some miracle performances to keep this team in remote conversation for the playoffs to be relevant when Jaren Jackson comes back. Because to be able to be a playoff team, which this team probably wants to be with someone like Ja's talent, it's going to take a miracle for him to keep them in conversation, like even like with the remote possibility of being the playoffs, until Jaren Jackson comes back to being what he was showing at the end of last season. So I think that this team is just in a bad spot in terms of depth and in terms of injury and health. So I just don't think this team has the talent right now to do anything more than a 9 seed. I think a 13 seed is probably going to be destined for them. 12, 13 range is probably going to be where they're going to fall.
Yeah, I have him at 11, but the 13 seeded Sacramento Kings are 3 games behind, and the 12 seeded San Antonio Spurs are 0 games behind. It's just like, I think I had Memphis winning their like head to head or something, or
Mm-hmm.
however they do the tiebreaker. So moving on to our 10 seed.
We've got a similarity here. We've got both the
Well,
Utah
yeah,
Jazz.
this is so crazy because I've always liked the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell is one of my favorite players. I don't have his jersey, but I have that like name and number tee, like the jersey shirt. It's
Oh
pretty
yeah.
cool. But yeah, I really just I think this team is going to eventually have to kind of blow it up a little bit. Gobert is a very good defender in the regular season, but come playoff time, that versatility is not there. And that's why I'd rather have someone like Bam Adebayo. I sound like a broken record saying Bam like every 5 minutes. But having someone like Bam, who is a blocker, but more importantly is versatile. And then also, Gobert's in a contract year. They had that whole rift with COVID. And I think that to keep Mitchell happy, I think that he's going to have to be shipped off. There are probably teams like I can't think of any on the top of my head that would want Gobert, but there are probably some playoff teams that need that interior help that could benefit from Gobert. But unfortunately, I don't see him making it in Utah all the way through the season.
I agree with you there. I think this was a team that a lot of us were talking about as a top 4, top 3 seed, especially myself included. I really thought the team was going to break out with Conley last season. They were a solid team last year, and I don't want to
Yeah.
discredit them at all, but I think Conley really regressed last season. Gobert and Gobert has a rift with Donovan Mitchell after the whole COVID situation. Uh, Bogdan has a little bit of an injury, so he missed the end of last season, and
He
then
was great though.
he was right before that. But just with the strengthening West and this team getting internally broken, I just
Yeah.
think that this team is just not made up enough ground to keep up with teams because we'll get to them in the future. But teams like Golden State are back, and that's one playoff spot immediately gone, in my opinion. And I know you might disagree, but they're definitely better than the Jazz. So they
Yeah,
leapfrogged.
100%.
They got leapfrogged by one team, and there's a couple other teams that I think leapfrogged them as well. So this team had to slide. I think, although Mitchell has been playing incredibly well, and he led them to a playoffs in his rookie year, I just don't think that this team is really capable just to go all the way. I think Gobert's gone, and then they just have no interior presence after that because Derek Favors, although he's a really good defender, I mean, I'm not.
He's not, yeah.
He's just not. He was
Especially
really bad
given
last year.
Gobert's impact as a roll man too in the pick and roll. I don't think Derek Favors will really match that. Because Gobert offensively, some of the advanced statistics really favored Gobert offensively because of his skill as a roll man. And I think you're losing that without him. And then I just question the rest of this team. Because really there's Donovan Mitchell, there's Bojan Bogdanovic, and there's Jordan Clarkson and maybe some Mike Conley, but who else will really take this offense? Donovan Mitchell's been carrying it for the last like 3 years. They haven't found anyone that could, ease the load off of him. Does he stay in Utah? Or, does he request a trade? Because I know he signed that extension, but I think in 1 to 2 years he's going to become unhappy with losing, and I think that this is Utah's trajectory.
It's a fair point to make, but it's a little harsh to say that Mitchell's going to run out. I think he really embraced the city. I think the city really embraces him. I think that it's just going to be a down year for the team. And if they're in the lottery, I mean, who knows who they can get? As you said, there's a lot of generational talent, and we've seen the borders fall in favorable ways for teams like the Pelicans for the Grizzlies, and they ended up getting in the 1 and 2 seed with like 6% chances of getting it. So,
And Minnesota last year.
especially Minnesota, I just think being in the lottery is going to be good for this team, and going
Mhm.
forward, getting someone to pair an actual like Donovan Mitchell type player next to him on the same level as him. Because I think Gobert's gone after this year. I don't think there's a way that they're going to reconciliate that relationship. So we'll see how that goes. But it's a year of missing the playoffs.
Yeah. And speaking more about Donovan Mitchell, one of my favorite players, I think you like him a lot too. I can't really speak for you, but Donovan Mitchell, I hate to say it, outside of scoring and carrying an offense, does he really add does this team will this team help him add other dimensions to his game? Because he's not a great playmaker. He's pretty overrated as a defender. And I think that part of player development is having the right team around you and having that right team that's invested in player development. And I don't know if this team will help Mitchell's playmaking develop or will help his defense develop. Because really, his job is to go and score the ball at an efficient level, which he does very, very well. But I don't think that he has the resources around him to develop other aspects of his game. So that's why I'm so interested in seeing how his mental state with the team kind of develops.
Yeah, that's a fair point. When you're the primary scorer on a team, your playmaking ability is definitely going to be hindered. There's no one else on this team that you're going to be, oh, I got to get the ball to this guy if he's hot because he's crazy good. Maybe you have Joe Ingles gets hot on the streak or something, or
Bogdanovich,
Bogdanovich
maybe.
gets hot on the streak, but it's going to be really reliant on him doing it all. And I just
Yeah.
think that it's going to be more of the same. And a one man team is not going to cut it in a team in a conference like the West that is very, very talented. I think there's 9 teams clearly ahead of them right now. And I don't think anyone can argue about those 9 teams. It's just the order of them and who misses out in the playoffs. So that brings me up to our 9 seed. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation because both of us have our 9 seed as our peers 3 seed.
This is yeah, I
But
just realized that.
we couldn't be more opposed when it comes to these next 2 teams.
All right.
You have the Golden State Warriors. I have the Portland Trailblazers. Now, before we get into why you like the Trailblazers, because we'll get to that when we talk about our 3 seeds, because I'd like to talk a little bit more about them coming further forward. But let's talk about why you think Golden State is worse than Portland.
Okay. I think that first of all, Golden State is very talented, have the talent and the coaching, but with the way the conference is going to go, and that loss of Klay Thompson just really hurts them so much. And I don't think that Wiggins can fill that role. Or Oubre, to be honest with you. I like Oubre too. But when I look at the Warriors, I see Steve Kerr and Steph Curry and Oubre playing in sync together, playing really well together. I see Wiseman as their traditional rim runner, roll man type guy. And I hope he develops other aspects of his game. And I see Draymond. Draymond's a player that a lot of people are hating on, but Draymond is good when the team around him is good. When you have Steph Curry, when you have guys that he can use his playmaking skills to develop, and guys that who aren't the best defenders or who are good defenders, and he can just help them with switchability. And he's a great leader too, Draymond. I like him a lot, actually. That's crazy. But I just don't think Wiggins fits into this picture with the way he plays and his inefficiency. And I think that if you give him a Klay Thompson role, I don't know how much. I don't think he's going to be a positive, to be very honest with you. I'm very harsh on Wiggins because I saw the potential out of him and he just totally squandered it. But I don't think that he's the right guy for Golden State. And that's why if they did make a Buddy Hield trade, I'd have him in the playoffs. But with Wiggins at that wing spot, effectively replacing Klay Thompson, his lack of consistent, efficient shooting and his lack of elite defense that Klay Thompson brought to the picture is really just going to hurt the rest of this team.
Now you're gonna have to wait to hear my opinion on the Warriors. So I'm gonna get to talk about why I don't like the Trailblazers. And it's a really surprise to see them not in the playoffs, especially with how well they played after Nurkic cut back and the improvement from Gary Trent Jr. and the surprise we've seen from Harry Giles in the preseason because he's looked really, really good, averaging around 18 points a game. And that's something that
Wow.
is really going to be needed for this team. So picking a team that has depth that this team does and playing as well as they did at the end of the season was a little bit of a surprise to see them out of the playoffs. I just, for some reason, one, think that there are 8 teams better than them. And as well as that, I think that one of their best players gets injured this season. Whether that's Nurkic comes back or whether that's more likely CJ. I don't think Dame's going to get hurt, but I think either Dame, CJ, or Nurkic is going to have a major injury. I think that's something that's going to derail their season because I don't think Carmelo's going to step up. I don't think Mr. Lear will take the development step that people think he's going to. I don't think Mr. Lear is a very good talent. I think I had him at 27 in the draft 2 years ago. And I think that while this team played really well, and that Dame's an MVP type player when he's dropping 40 points a game, defensively, this team is weak. And I think that that's really going to hurt them. Dame and CJ are undersized. Carmelo is not a good defender. Their only real good defender is probably Nasir Little, and he
Covington.
probably Covington. I forgot about Covington. Covington's a very good defender.
Darius
That's the
Garland.
only good defender that's going to start for them. So uh, that's a little bit of concern for me, and I just think that overall with team defense and I don't know. I just think an injury is going to happen, and I think that's something going to just derail the season, whether that be defense or injury. So I don't have a great explanation, but I think there's 8 teams better than them right now.
That's kind of more of mine for Golden State, and the fact that Wiggins' fit just concerns me a little bit. So moving on to the 8 seed, uh, we have some more discrepancy, a lot of discrepancy actually, because your 8 seed is my 2 seed, and my 8 seed is your 6 seed, so it's not that bad. But let's let's talk about Houston first,
Let's talk about Houston. Yeah.
because there it's a little bit more close. Now Houston, I think that John Wall has returned to, I wouldn't say his old 16-17 form because that was just a different breed of point guard. That was just insane. But he he wants to complement Harden. He wants to play with Harden and he's willing to make adjustments in his game that will help Harden become a better player. And then Christian Wood, that was the signing of the offseason in my opinion. The value and the player that you're going to get out of him is just perfect. And now that he's on the national stage and instead of Detroit, where it's like, yeah,
Well,
just
and
a
the
talk.
AD was Pelicans.
Yeah, but he didn't have his role there wasn't as
He was averaging
large.
20 points a game at the end of the season.
He was, but at that point, everyone was just focused on AD.
AD
You
was
just
gone. AD wouldn't play. This was Christian Wood taking AD's role and averaging 20 points a game.
and then in Detroit, where he was averaging like 15, 16 on a consistent basis, he is going to thrive here with the spacing that they have. And then DeMarcus Cousins, I don't. He's never going to return to that old Sacramento and that 1 year in New Orleans DeMarcus Cousins that we used to enjoy, but he'll be okay. He'll be all right.
Still the
Really,
best center
all
this team's ever had. Well, not
yeah,
ever had, but like James Harden's ever had. Because
yeah,
obviously I'm not comparing him with like a Houston great center, but like James Harden centers.
yes, yes. I think that I would agree with that. Plus, there's PJ Tucker, Daniel House, Chris Clemens. Unfortunately, is out, but they do have some bench pieces that are reliable. And I think that this team is better suited to supplement Harden than last year's team with Westbrook. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. I think the spacing is a lot better
The
this year.
spacing is so much better.
I mean,
It all falls on Harden, to be honest with you. This team gave up a lot for Harden. They embraced Harden. Daryl Morey did everything in his power to make Harden happy. And Harden going to the strip club instead of to practice is just a giant middle finger that he throws up at this team who has done everything, whose fans have been so loyal to him. I don't see Harden being traded for the salaries and for just because the teams don't have the capital that Houston wants in return. And so this is all about Harden. Harden could elevate this team to a 4 or 5 seed, like we've seen in recent years, or he can just kind of like slouch, and this team goes from a 6 to, and this team becomes a 6 to an 8 seed. So I think really the pressure's on Harden.
I don't think Harden is going to let that happen. I think even though he doesn't care about the team, his reputation is still on the line here, and he's still a basketball player at the end of the day. And I think that although his attitude problems would probably for most teams be a locker room nightmare, the fact of the matter is he is James Harden, and superstars can get away with anything because he can go wherever he wants and come back and drop 50 the next night. And the thing is that maybe if he is focused, he could do that on a more consistent basis. And I think that this team is really talented. Wall and Harden is the best backcourt in the NBA. I don't even think that's even close.
Are there any other real contenders?
I don't think there is. Clay and Curry when healthy, and that's about it.
Clay and Curry, yeah. I'm just looking through. I don't see anything. Yeah, I don't really see anything else that could
Damon
match.
CJ, it's kind of close, but not really.
No, no, I wouldn't say. I wouldn't say so.
And then there's really no one else. You look at the East,
Is Kemba and Brown maybe? That's no, not at all actually.
they are, I think, far and away the best backcourt in the NBA. So pairing them with two legit frontmen or front court players in Christian Wood, who I think is an incredible player, and
Yeah,
DeMarcus Cousins, who at the very least we saw in Golden State is willing to take a role and able to play very effectively. And post Achilles, he was fine in Golden State. He took a role, was willing to sit his part and play a championship
and he was
contender
willing
team.
to space the floor too.
I think that it's a very, very compelling team. They have four great players and a couple of solid bench pieces, and with
PJ.
the just sheer talent they have in Wall and Harden, I think this team is a playoff lock. And I think that there's no team that's able to trade for Harden, so he's staying there no matter what's going to happen, no matter how hard he wants out. It's not going to happen. You're staying there. So now we have a little bit of a discrepancy here. And we can get into your why you like this team in a second, but I'm gonna tell you why I don't like the Clippers.
Yeah,
As I said, for a lot of teams, it's not about talent, it's about mentality and dysfunction. Basketball is a lot about chemistry because as much as you want to one man it, unless you're James Harden, it's gonna be really, really, really hard to one man a team. So looking at this team, they lose Doc Rivers and they go down to Ty Lue. Ty Lue does not command the same respect Doc Rivers does. Doc Rivers can do whatever he wants because he has that reputation and credibility as a coach. I know Ty Lue is a champion, but that's LeBron. LeBron coached that team pretty much, and he played for that entire team. And Kawhi Leonard isn't the same vocal leader and player as LeBron James is. As much as people want to argue that he might be a better NBA player right now, he sure as hell is not the same leader. And
no,
that is really going to hurt them. The fact is that when they're talking about um, who did they say? They said that Paul George is expected to take a leadership role. That's probably a bad sign. Because what happened last time he led a team? The Pacers fell apart. And that team was built through identity. And they don't have a Roy Hibbert on this team. And I don't think that this team is going to be the same caliber as they were last season. I think they're going to be a little bit complacent, and they're going to have especially the load management is going to be a huge issue for them. We've seen Lou Will speak out about that, and the fact of the matter is that if they start load managing at the beginning of the season, dysfunction could turn into chaos, and they're going to have to stop load managing to fix the team and to just pick up some wins. So this team is going to make the playoffs, but I think it's going to be a lot harder than anticipated. I have them with the same record as the Trailblazers, so this is a very close call between these two teams, in my opinion.
so I will talk about why I like the Clippers later on. But oh wow, we have agreement. The 7th seed, the
Seven seed.
Pelicans, and I think yeah, I'll. This is your team, and this is your time to talk about the Pelicans, and I'll probably agree with you on most of this too.
So let me start from the beginning of the offseason. Fire Gentry. Yay, it finally happened. Our coach with no identity, no ideas, no creativity, no set plays.
Just a late game
That's
liability.
that's why we lost. We lost so many games. We choked every fourth quarter lead we had because we had no set plays. We didn't know what to do with the lead. So when I heard that we were hiring Stamp Gun, it was like, really? An average coach in Detroit that's been out of the league, whose only superstar wanted him gone, and Dwight Howard. Like Dwight Howard did not want Stan Van Gundy there. But to his credit, he has won me over, and that has happened through two things. Uh, the team likes him a lot. Zion seems to like his style. The team seems to really be really responsive to him. JJ Redick loves him. Obviously, he was really instrumental in getting him there. And JJ Redick can help implement the culture, and that's the biggest thing. He has a culture, he has identity that he wants. He wants grit and defense. The first practice they had was 3 hours of straight defense.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
This team was awful defensively, even though they had Drew Holiday, Lonzo Ball, and Zion Williamson and Derek Favors. They were bad defensively. They have a mentality. They went for grit. They trade away Drew Holiday. They get Steven Adams, the culture setter. Steven Adams will single-handedly change the culture because this man outworks everyone, and he is a trend. His on-the-court performances on the defensive end make him a culture setter. And I
His
think that,
offensive rebounding.
especially, and the team really lacked rebounding. Josh Hart, for many games, was our leading rebounder, and that was really concerning.
And you know what? Steven Adams, I'll just say it straight up. I feel like he's the best offensive rebounder in the league. Working
And
with
that's even
Westbrook,
close.
yeah, working with Westbrook for all those years, getting his offensive rebounding, but also, taking it for the team and letting Westbrook get those defensive rebounds so he can start the transition. He's a team player. He's a great addition. And then Bledsoe is a good team defender too.
I think that he recognizes the talent on the team, and he says, all right, we've got a lot of playmakers. Let's run 2 point guards. He has identity. He has a idea he wants to implement, and he recognizes the talent that they have and is working with it. We already saw in the preseason their defense looks really improved. I think the first quarter against the Bucks, they scored about like 19 points. I think that Brandon Ingram is going to improve on the defensive end. Zion Williamson is going to be an absolute monster. Like
He looks better. He just
he
looks
looks,
like a better player.
and I think that health wise, I think he can stay healthy. He averaged 23 last year while being out of shape and a little bit overweight. It doesn't matter because he's so athletic. He can just shake it off. I think that this team has two superstars in Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, a great center, an elite shooter in JJ Redick, and he's a top 3 shooter in the league for sure, and the number one shooter on, I don't know how to describe it because he can shoot from any angle, any body, but he's like the Patrick Mahomes of shooters.
He's
Like
one of the most creative shooters. I guess I don't know if creative's a word.
uh he's the best
A
shooter
versatile shooter.
without having his feet set because his lower body can be in literally any position, but his upper body mechanics are so smooth and crisp that he could be running 20 miles an hour one direction and still make the shot because his upper body mechanics are just so perfect. And Lonzo Ball is fine. He looks improved. He has the work ethic, and he really is working. Uh, Vincent, the coach that they're working with, that Brandon was working with, is a really, really good developmental coach. They got a lot of good role players. Nikhil Alexander Walker, Josh Hart, Jackson Hayes. They have the depth and they have the talent to be a really good team. The only thing limiting them is experience. Zion Williamson is their longest tenured player. But I think this team now has identity and has a defensive mentality. And with the offensive weapons that they have, this team in a couple years, I am not crazy to think will be an elite team. They have all the
No, they're
capital
not.
to go out and get any superstar they want to pair with their already elite roster of just great talent. I think this team is poised. I think Van Gundy was a sensible and perfect hire for the mood and tone of this team. And I think that this team is really ready to take a step because anything is better than Gentry, and the team looks
Yeah.
a lot better.
It's I really like this team a lot. And just looking at the talent and depth that they have, so this is ESPN's depth chart that I have pulled up. They'll probably run with Alonzo and Bledsoe, that 2 point guard lineup. And we've seen the defensive impact that both players can make when they're on a good defensive minded team. And look at that's the best defensive backcourt in the league.
Maybe we thought that last year with Lonzo and Drew, and that wasn't
Yeah.
what it turned out to
But
be.
with the coaching
With coaching,
and
sure.
with Bledsoe's experience, I feel like I don't really know any other backcourts that can match up. Can you think of anything?
It's not a back. I mean, technically, I could think of Kawhi PG, but they're not like a 1-2. It's a 2-3.
Yeah.
No, I can't think of anyone that would really contend with that besides Bogdan and Trae Young.
Oh yeah. Best defensive backcourt in the. I forgot about that. That's like the opposite. But Brandon Ingram, they have Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson and Steven Adams running out the rest of the rotation. But as you said in a previous episode, and I think you might have said before, this whole idea of staggering the offenses and just the lineups in general. So maybe you throw in Reddick at the 3 instead of Ingram.
No, he's a true 2. Reddick's only going to play the 2 for this team.
Okay, then maybe Hart.
Because I think Gundy, Hart can play the 3.
Hart. Okay, so maybe you do Lonzo, Reddick, Hart, Williamson, Adams. That's the strongest front court in the NBA, and one of the most creative shooters in the NBA, and a solid playmaker and defender in ball.
Great playmaker. Don't discredit. That's one thing he's good at is defense and playmaking.
What?
Lonzo's a great playmaker.
I said good playmaker.
He's good. He's great. He's a great playmaker.
Okay, that's technically a synonym. But then, in a heartbeat, you can have a lineup centered around Brandon Ingram. And now the whole defense has to shift their focus from Zion and Reddick to Brandon Ingram, who, I'm not going to say it, I'll let you say it. What are your thoughts on Brandon Ingram and the whole KD comp?
The KD comp's a little ridiculous because KD's on a different breed, but his mid-range game is unfair. I know he was a little cold last night, but that's preseason. I wouldn't lead to. He is one of the most silky smooth shooters in the mid-range, and at 6'11", 6'10",
Yeah,
it's just impossible to stop someone that tall with that good of a jumper from shooting. He gets what he wants, and he's not the Kevin Durant type player yet. And I don't think he will be, but he will get 60-70% of the way there, and he will be an All-NBA player.
And that's an All-NBA player right there, because Kevin Durant's generational. We haven't even talked about Jackson Hayes,
or Nickeil Alexander-Walker,
who I think can benefit, or even Kyra Lewis.
Oh, we haven't even talked about Kyra Lewis.
Yeah. And then the other guy that you got undrafted, Najee Marshall, he's an exciting player that is just a ferocious finisher in college at Xavier. And so I don't think he'll see many minutes, but if someone gets injured and Marshall steps in, I have faith in him being a reliable player. So this team is really, really deep. And I think just given the nature of the Western Conference and the lack of experience that they have with Zion being their longest tenured player, they end up falling to the 7 seed. But you think we can see them at the 4 or 5?
I think it's a little bit too early this year, but definitely I think the 5 seed is definitely attainable. And then you look at if Houston and Golden State don't perform the way that they can on paper, then for sure they can become a 4 or 5 seed. But this team is the polar opposite of what they were in 2017 when they when they swept the Blazers. They had 3 great players and no depth. Now they have a lot of good players and a lot of depth. And the coaching mentality shifted completely too. So this team is a polar opposite team. They've done a complete 360, a complete 180 in 2 years. And I think that's really, really one of the best rebuilds, one of the quickest rebuilds in the NBA is the New Orleans Pelicans.
But it does help when you're getting rid of Anthony Davis and you have all those assets.
It also helps when you have a 3% chance of getting Zion Williamson in the league. Kind of nice as you there.
You know what was really funny about that? When we were talking about the Anthony Davis trade, I'm like, okay, so the Lakers, they should give up Ingram, but they should just keep Kuzma. Kuzma's the better player. Everyone was saying that. Look at how much that's changed.
Branding was a big red flag with his heart condition.
Yeah.
With
And the Lakers player development staff, they need to
I've been the biggest Lakers
yeah,
player development hater because look at Julius Randle, look at um, who's some other really
D'Lo,
good D'Lo,
D'Lo. Yeah, there
Brandon
needs to be a little
Ingram,
bit of overhaul there. Even Lonzo.
to a lesser extent, but definitely Brandon Ingram, Randle, and D'Lo flourished when they left LA.
Hmm. So we talked about Houston. They're your sixth seed. We uh, so I'll go with my sixth seed, and I think the best way to look for me at seeds 6 through 3 is that they are all on the same tier. And the sixth seed is Dallas for me. They have 43
One
wins.
through one is probably around here.
Who? Denver?
No, one the one season their own tier.
Oh yeah. I don't want to spoil anything yet. Just in my
It's
eyes,
not a spoiler who the one seed is.
no. Okay, no, but the 2 seed.
All right, the
I don't see. I see the 2 seed as above 3 through 6,
all right.
but the 6 seed is Dallas for me. They're at 43 wins, and the 3 seed is Portland for me. They're at 46 wins. So I think that this is a very fluid and a group of teams that can fluctuate easily. So 6 I have Dallas, 5 I have Phoenix, 4 I have Denver, and 3 I have Portland. We'll start with Dallas. I think that they could jump to the 3 or 2 seed. Luka's just going to go nuclear. They have Josh Richardson, who is a great acquisition for them with his defensive prowess. Josh Green, who is a great finisher and was an excellent defender in college. But the reason why I have them slipping a little bit is Kristaps Porzingis. His durability really questions me a lot. He's such a tall player, such a skinny player, and with that many knee injuries, you wonder how often is he going to see the floor. He is such a talented player and complements Luka so well when he is on the floor, but just last looking at the last 3 years, 16, 17, he played 66 games out of 82. 17, 18, he got 48 games out of 82. 18, 19, he didn't play the whole season, and 19, 20, he played about 57. So these are he's going to be missing a lot of games, and I don't think that this team can afford for him to miss this many games. And because of that, I see them slipping a little bit in the wins column, and they slip to the number 6 seed. The number 5 seed, we agree on Phoenix. And there's a lot to like about this team. Wouldn't you agree?
I really think there's a lot to like.
I think we're probably overrating Chris Paul's supporting cast a little bit. I think the media is overrating them just because of how good they played in the bubble.
I think that's so. Here's what I said about the Suns because they are the popular hip team among like the media because how well they played last season, and that's why I feel like I'm high on them because I feel like personally they should be ranked lower. They shouldn't be as hyped as they are, but I think the hype has a lot of evidence behind it.
And there's a lot of value to it.
I think you just look. I think the two things to look at with this team: backcourt and wings. I think that with Monty Williams is an incredible coach. He can do whatever he wants on the wing, whatever. With guys like Crowder, Bridges, Saric, Cam Johnson, and Etwan Moore, you could do any combination of lineups that you go. You can go defensive, you can go shooting, you can go uh,
Taller.
tall, you can go short. Like he can go whatever direction to complement Paul and Booker. And then Langston Galloway's really good depth. I think that was really sneaky signing there. DeAndre Ayton will play the full season because he missed the beginning of the year with a blood thinner suspension because you use blood thinners to hide drug tests. So he got suspended for that. He got popped, but he's going to be fully playing the full season. He looks really dominant with Chris Paul's passing ability. Look for him as a lob threat, pick and roll threat. He will be really nasty this season. And we'll finally stop seeing, oh, they could have had Luka. Oh, they could have had Trae Young. No, I mean, Aiton's a really good player.
Yeah. I think Ayton did fall under the radar just because of Luka and Trey and even Jaren Jackson and how they've panned out, but he's still a very good player. But if you just look at this team, the supporting cast, there's Booker, and we know exactly what to expect from Booker. That's just a lights out scoring and shooting. Then on top of that, you have this little wing trio here of Bridges, Cam Johnson, and Jay Crowder. And besides Cam Johnson's kind of suspect defensive ability, they're all your prototypical 3-and-D players. They shoot
Well, and Antoine
efficiently.
Moore.
Oh, and that's on more. And they can defend. And Jay Crowder just is riding high off of a finals appearance where he had a pretty significant impact in the absence of guys like Kendrick Nunn. And then you have DeAndre Ayton, who, while he's not a as good of a defender as I want him to be, he's just a behemoth of a man. Like, he is a man amongst boys sometimes. And offensively, in the pick and roll, that's just going to be scary with Chris Paul, who is arguably the best pick and roll passer in the league. And then on top of that, DeAndre Ayton, who could be one of the best and most intimidating finishers in the league. And then you have Chris Paul distributing to Booker. And we saw how Chris Paul can tremendously benefit an offense with Houston. And then 3 to 4 3-and-D wings that can benefit this team tremendously and that Chris Paul can bounce off of. And then I didn't even talk about Dario Saric yet.
Or Jalen Smith.
Or Jalen Smith. All of this combined with Monty Williams' coaching, he is, in my eyes, a front runner for Coach of the Year. There's a lot to love about this team. And we're giving them a little bit too much hype, but there is evidence there. And this team, I expect them to be a top 4 to 5 seed in the West.
Yeah, the reason that they're hyped up is not the reason they should be good this year. I think what I talk about a lot and the thing I care about with teams is mentality. And Chris Paul is a mentality setter.
Yeah.
He is determined, he is gritty, and he will do whatever it takes. He will snitch on you for having your shirt untucked. He will find any loophole in the rules to get an advantage. Chris Paul is a player I love. And, I mean, he's a great player. I think this team has really, really good depth. Maybe not the best center depth, but depth on the wing and depth in the backcourt is absolutely incredible. This team can play. They can match up with anyone purely because of the versatility and the depth they have on the wings. So with a great coach and a great cast, this team is poised to take a leap, and they already have good chemistry together. Chris Paul will fit. He can fit seamlessly anywhere. He led the Thunder to a 5 seed. This Suns team is exponentially better than
100%, yeah.
Like Shai and Booker, you can say, okay, sure, maybe you can consider them equal. Booker's better, but maybe you consider them equal. The rest of the team, Ayton and Steve Adams, sure, we'll call them equal. Look at the rest of the team; it's not even close.
Yeah.
Gallo versus those entire depth of wings, and then Billy Donovan and Monty Williams are pretty similar coaches, or in terms of talent-wise. So this team are built like the Thunder last season, except the Thunder were not hyped up as much as the Suns are.
Yeah. So moving on to my number 4 seed.
And my number 4 seed. We got agreement again.
Yeah, we got agreement. I think the Denver Nuggets, they are riding high off of a big, big series win against the LA Clippers and that giant comeback, which was really fun to watch. And while it might have been a 4-1 series win, I would say three of those games were within like 7 points. So Denver was putting up a fight, but losing interior presences like Jeremy Grant and Mason Plumlee will hurt the team a lot. But at the same time, that opens up minutes for Bol and Michael Porter Jr. And I think Jokic, we already know he's great, and defenses will key in on him. But I think defenses now have to respect Murray, and I think that people will just key on him a little bit more. Because before that playoff series, we knew he was a talented offensive player, but no one thought he was that good because he was playing like an all-NBA level player. Like almost outdueling Donovan Mitchell is saying something for your offensive game. So I think that defenses will key in on Murray a little bit, and that hype will kind of die down a little bit.
Now, the Nuggets draft like how I would love a team to draft. In the NBA, you have 4 or 5 guys that are like, okay, those players will make your team better. And then you've got the rest. What they do is they find the player that falls because of injury, because of some lack of college performance or something, and they will take him. They took Bol because he fell because of injury concern. They took MPJ because of injury concern. And this year they took RJ Hampton because of college or lack of college tape that he was playing over
New
in
Zealand.
New Zealand and played fairly well. I mean, he was playing against men, so I think he's going to be a very good pick going forward. But this season, MPJ is poised to take a Brandon Ingram type leap.
Yeah, I agree.
Minutes have been opened up for him. He showed poise and composure at the end of last season and great development. And he will be the front runner for most improved player because of
Yeah,
the role that he's been afforded and the talent that he has. He can easily step up and become a great player. Combined with the core of Jokic, Murray, Harris, Millsap, and then Barton off the bench, this team has a great starting five and they have good depth. Bull has potential and is a dominant force when he's going. And he can
yeah.
stretch the floor as a five, which is really impressive. This team has been good. They will continue to be good. Jokic is I don't know. He's like Chris thin now. Like he has stopped the diet. He has stopped the Cokes. He has gone strictly to Diet Coke, and it really looks like this team can be a very very solid team.
Okay, first of all, Diet Coke is actually unhealthier than regular Coke because of
Yeah,
the
I know.
artificial
I
stuff.
know.
But yeah, and I get it, I get it. But going back to Will Barton, there was a report that came out saying that he wants to be a starter and he's not going to accept his role on the bench. And with Michael Porter Jr. deservingly getting that starting small forward spot, do you see any potential suitors for him? Because I think he's going to be on the move.
Well, anyways, you can trade and get more depth. You will be a starter. Go to OKC, get George Hill. Boom, fix your problem. Now you're a
Yeah,
starter. Who cares? Enjoy missing the playoffs.
yeah. And we didn't even talk about Monte Morris, who's one of the more underrated backup point guards and one of the like high quality backup point guards in the league. And then who else? Oh, Facundo Campazzo, that Argentinian rookie who's 29.
That's like Nico Melli last year. Nico Melli somehow was not a good shot. I like Nico Melli, but he was not a great shooter
Yeah.
last year.
He was but in the preseason game, Facundo's like 5'10, 5'11, but he plays like the stingiest and most active defense I've seen.
I
You know that
love
like
that.
one guy that like foot fires in a pickup game? That's him. And then he has his like underhand shovel pass. So him and Jokic with their playmaking abilities, I'm not gonna say that Facundo is like some all-star kind of guy, but he'll be kind of fun to watch at times.
For sure.
Like a better Marcelo Huertas, if you know who that is.
So let's move on to the conversation we promised, our 3 seed conversation. I'll let you start off. Why do you think the Portland Trail Blazers are a top 3 team in the West?
This is I know I've said that I know I was talking about like I know I said that this is the best roster since LaMarcus Aldridge, but I think that for Damian Lillard, this is the best roster that he's ever had around him, barring injury, of course. CJ McCollum has complemented him so well. They have great chemistry together. Derek Jones is a really fun to watch, exciting player who offers a lot of defensive versatility. Robert Covington, you know what to expect from him. You expect great defense. You expect some shooting too. And I think that now that Nurkic is healthy, now that he's had time, now that he's had an offseason to kind of get back in shape, I think that his impact will definitely be more pronounced. And then on top of that, Gary Trent, he averaged like 9 points a game, but he's such a great shooter. Rodney Hood, he can get buckets too. Anthony Simons, he's been getting kind of hyped up after that one game that he had 2 years ago where he dropped 48, but he is still a serviceable backup point guard, especially offensively. I think Carmelo has accepted his role, and Enes Kanter he's been traditionally known as a very good offensive and rebounding center and a pretty decent pick and roll player. So I think that while this team might not be the best defensively, this is a contender for a top five offense in the league. And they do have at the wings some defensive versatility to keep teams honest. And I think that because of this will elevate Damian Lillard's game so much. I think he'll be able to score efficiently. He'll be able to, bump up his assist numbers. And I think that overall, this will benefit Lillard so much. This can boost him into that MVP conversation just from going from a All NBA first team player to an MVP type player. And because of that, barring injury, that's one of the main reasons why you have them so low. I think that this team will be able to get the best of Denver, Phoenix, and Dallas.
Now I get to talk about my team, the Warriors.
Yep.
Steph Curry is back, and I don't think people realize how much this guy can carry a team. And this is not a bad team either. But those unanimous MVP Curry days are going to come back because this man is absolutely ridiculous. He's going to average 3 this year. I have no question about that. Steph Curry is a monster. This is his team. He is healthy, and he can carry them to the playoffs. And let's look at the supporting cast around them. Kelly Oubre and Draymond Green are two of the most competitive guys. And the mentality that they bring to the team are going to be great for guys like Wiggins, who have not been held accountable because of his talent, because he can be able to coast through it all. But these guys will not let Wiggins just go, I'm fine. I'll play. I'll get 16 points a game. Whatever. They will have Wiggins playing at his potential. And if he's not, he'll be shipped out the door for someone like Buddy Hield. So I think the combination of getting Curry and Draymond back, the addition of Oubre, and then I hope and I think that a guy like Wiggins can take the step up on a team that's this good. And if not, he can be a good role player. The Warriors have never had a big man like James Wiseman. He was the best player in this draft, in my opinion, and he's one of the most ready players in the draft, in my opinion. He is athletic, he is huge, and he is great offensively, and he can be a great rim defender. His athleticism is going to allow this team to play with great pace. I mean, they've had guys that are tall, like Zaza Pachulia, but they haven't. Zaza Pachulia and James Wiseman have not even the same category of athlete. Wiseman allowed this team to be as dynamic as they possibly can be. I know that Clay is going to be a huge, huge stumbling block because Clay is an elite player, a top 3-5 shooting guard in the league. But he's not there. But I think the other wings that they have can make up for that. Not to mention they have decent depth. Jordan Poole, Eric Pascal. They've got a couple of good depth that were able to get quality minutes and develop last season when they were the ones playing as the team. Eric Pascal and Poole played solid minutes last season. And they have a guy, Nico Mannion, who is a solid piece in the draft that they got. So this team has decent depth and a elite starting five. I think this is one of the best starting fives in the NBA. I think that might be a little bit of an overreaction, but I think it's fair to say that this team, led by a true world known athlete, a superstar by every sense of the definition, will be easily a 3 seed.
I can understand your argument there. Yeah, I understand that. I just, I have some questions about Wiggins. And my thing about Wiseman is, yes, he is an extraordinary athlete. At the minimum, he will be that rim running shot blocking center that Zaza Pachulia and Andrew Bogut could never even dream of being. But I question his versatility outside of that. He's shown flashes of playmaking and ball handling, but will that translate well to the NBA? And will he provide adequate spacing for, Steph Curry and guys like Wiggins who need that extra spacing push to, be at their best level? And then also at the same time, I think that Okongwu was a better fit for Golden State just purely because of the versatility that Okongwu offers compared to Wiseman on defense. Wiseman is a better shot blocker. He has the frame, he has the vert, he has the athleticism, and he has the instincts to become like a better shot blocker than Rudy Gobert by his third year, which is really saying something. But at the same time, I question his ability to fade out to the perimeter and, kind of pick up on Draymond's slack, as Draymond, I feel like, will regress slowly.
I just think it doesn't really matter. He is still the best center the Warriors have had since, probably DeMarcus Cousins was probably a better fit, but he didn't play many games for them. He only played a little bit of the postseason and into the regular season. I think this is going to be, you look at the 15, 16 Golden State Warriors, because this is what this team is. I think that Oubre can get 50%, 60, 70% of Klay Thompson's role. I think Draymond Green is going to be a similar player to what he was. You have Andrew Wiggins, which is a better player in all honesty than Iguodala, and then Bogut and Wiseman are not even on the same scale. And they were 73-9. This team's not going to be 73-9. One, they can't even win 73 games this year, but this team is going to be easily a top team in the West, in my opinion. And I could see it derailing and being a 9 seed if Steph doesn't come back or Steph gets hurt again. But with Steph's ankles intact, this team is a top 3 team in the West.
Now, I do have one question about Steph. Do you see him actually reaching? So you said he can average 30, but do you think he'll have that same overall impact as he did on the 16-17 Warriors? Because I think that he benefited tremendously off of Clay and even off of a better Draymond Green than what we'll see. Do you think that he'll reach like 90% of that? Or do you think he's just going to like blow us out of the water?
I think we've forgotten how good Steph Curry is. I think 90% is achievable. Because I don't think he's going to be the same player as 15-16 because 15-16 was a different breed. But
yeah,
this team is loaded. And Steph Curry was the best player in basketball in 15-16. He will be a top 3 basketball player this season. And I think the top 3 this year is going to be probably, it's tough. The upper echelon is LeBron, AD, Giannis, Harden, Curry, Luka. That's the 6 right now, in my opinion.
Wait, so LeBron, KD? Because I always thought there was like a tier of 7 players.
KD and AD. KD and AD. That's the 7.
KD, AD, LeBron, Kawhi, Giannis,
I forgot about Kawhi.
Giannis, Harden, and Curry. Those are the 7 players that have just dominated the last 5 years. You know what I mean?
I think Luka's in.
And then now Luka's in as the 8th.
I think maybe Kawhi's out this season.
But I would not.
I just think
Kawhi played very well.
No, I'm not saying Kawhi doesn't belong in there. I just think he's not going to be there or play that level this season.
Wow, that's so shocking.
If they make the postseason, he'll easily be the 3rd best player in the league. But I'm just saying, I don't think he's going to play that way. I just don't think he's going to be motivated that way this season.
But like even last year, which was really a mess for the Clippers, Kawhi went out and averaged. I know he had some really good numbers, even barring like everything that went on. He's still
27, but he only played in 57 games?
Yeah, 27, 7, and 5, 2 steals, and a little bit less than a block a game.
I mean, if you're only playing 57 games, you can't be in the top 8 players, in my opinion.
Yeah. But also, remember, in the playoffs, he was as consistent as ever.
What I'm saying, he'll be in that competition in the playoffs, but in the regular season, because of not playing games, he's not going to be in there.
But what's the status on his load management? Just out of curiosity, because
I don't know.
He has no excuse. He has no excuse to load manage.
He's never had one. He just wants to load manage. He had one first year in Toronto, but last season he had no excuse. End of Toronto season, he had no excuse.
But didn't he have an injury in the offseason going into the Clippers, and that's why they load managed him?
He loves load management. That is his thing.
It's a Spurs thing.
So I am dead set. He's going to load manage this season. And if that happens, I just don't think that you can, like Ishan and William said, he was the better rookie. But who won Rookie of the Year? John Morant, because he played games.
Yeah, that's true. But 23, he played like, how many did Zion play? Like 23 games?
23 games, yeah.
Okay, but more on Kawhi Leonard. We have the LA Clippers as my number 2 team, and the Dallas Mavericks as your number 2 seed in the West. And I just kind of forgot about this. This was in the back of our minds, but when we look at the seeding and we look at the playoffs, we did not think of the play-in games. The 8th seed in whatever conference that we have is going to be the 8th seed. We're gonna ignore the play-in games because we forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot to be very honest with you. But I think that This Clippers team is going. I think Paul George, just from what I've seen out of him, he looks hungry. And we forget how good Paul George was before that injury, that terrible leg injury, and the year before he came to LA when he was third in MVP voting. I'm not going to say he will return to that form because I just don't think he will, but Paul George at times, at many instances in his career, has looked like a top 10 NBA player. And if he just comes back into the top 15 conversation, which I think is attainable, that will just be a tremendous plus for the Clippers as a whole. And then Marcus Morris Sr., well, I think giving him the contract that he got was just absurd and totally uncalled for. He is still a very good shooter. And then Serge Ibaka is a 3-and-D center, which I like a lot. I just love 3-and-D players. An elite shot blocker and an elite floor spacer, which will be so much better than Montrezl Harrell, who just feasted off of the Pat Bev pick and roll, which is a very easily exploitable, play come playoff time. And then on top of that, there's Pat Bev and Reggie Jackson, who I think might split minutes, more 60-40 Pat Bev. And then Luke Kennard, who's a good shooter. Zubac, who's pretty reliable. Mifiondu Kabengele, who we're very high on out of college. I'm excited to see if he can do anything in the NBA, but as a third string center. Nick Batum is there. Lou Williams will provide that scoring boost in the first half of the season because I see him gone by the deadline. He wants out now that Harrell is out and after Paul George and Kawhi Leonard's special treatment. But we forget how good of a team this is on paper. But as you said, it's about commanding the respect of Ty Lue. And if Ty Lue doesn't get that respect, can Paul George or Kawhi Leonard step up and be the vocal leader of the team? Because in Indiana, Paul George was the vocal leader of the team. He was the heartbeat of those teams that put up a fight against the Miami Heat with LeBron James. And even in that 1 year in OKC, despite all the love that Westbrook got, I felt like Paul George was the vocal leader of that team too. So if he can step up, then this team, in my opinion, is the second best roster in the West and the second best overall team in the West. Because Paul George missed games, Kawhi Leonard has no excuse to load manage. Marcus Morris was a later season acquisition. Ibaka is so much better than Harrell, just a better fit, in my opinion, even a better player. And now that Lou Will be back for, we'll just ignore Lou Will. But now that this team has had time to play together cohesively, I think that they will be a better cohesive unit and that they'll be greater than the sum of their parts, which is what they were kind of hoping to be.
It makes sense. They have the second best duo and maybe third best duo. I'd be hard pressed. It'd be a difficult conversation for me to say Wall and Harden versus PG and Kawhi.
Did we forget Irving and Durant?
I said in the West.
Oh, in the West. Okay.
No. I should have prefaced that, but I'd be hard pressed to think that there's a better duo than them. I mean, they have the talent. I just worry about he has no excuse. He won't have an excuse. He'll still do it. Lou Will's not happy about that. He's the leader of this team. Lou Will is. He's the long. I just think that there's a recipe for disaster here, and I think that at the end of the season, Kawhi's gonna have to stop load managing and play every game. And I think that's gonna hurt their playoff chances because this team has championship aspirations, and they legitimately do because this team is the third, fourth most talented team in the league. They are in that same echelon as Boston, New York, Brooklyn, not New York, obviously not for New York, Brooklyn, LA, and LA. They are in that's the top four.
Oh wow.
Anyone I'm forgetting? Because I think that's the clear four.
I'll say Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee, yeah, they're in there. That's the clear.
But I guess come playoff time, you can kind of eliminate Milwaukee and maybe the Clippers. But I think when Kawhi was getting heat with the whole San Antonio mismanagement thing 2 years ago, and he goes to the Raptors, he shattered everyone's expectations, even in the regular season, as a just a great scorer and player. And I think that now that there's heat on him again, now that there's heat on Paul George, I think both of them are going to be more motivated than ever to show that they belong back in that conversation for top 15 players for Paul George and then top 7 players for Kawhi Leonard.
Well, I'd say for Kawhi Leonard top three. That's what he wants to prove.
Okay, yeah.
But when he was in Toronto, there wasn't another guy trying to prove themselves. He had the whole team to prove himself with. The fact that there's two players that both have something to prove this season could either go incredibly well, both of them prove all the haters wrong, or they're both fighting for themselves and not for a team. And if you're not fighting for the team, Lou Will's not going to like you. Pat Bev's not going to like you. And then I think Ibaka, he'll understand Kawhi. They play together. But I think Ty Lue just doesn't have the ability to manage two players who are on a mission for their own personal reputation.
But at the same time, I think they do know what to. They do like each other, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. If Paul George didn't get traded to the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard wouldn't have come. That was kind of just the unspoken part of the deal. So there's something that they do see in each other, and I think hopefully they bring the best out of each other. But that leaves the Dallas Mavericks for you as the number 2 team in the West. Why do you see them as a 52-20 team, which is something very special and better than, teams like Golden State, Denver, the Clippers, the Suns, the Rockets, Pelicans, etc.?
I think the Mavericks have an incredible player. I don't think if he hasn't already proved this, Luka Doncic will prove himself to be a top 3 regular season player. This season. I think he'll be second MVP voting. He is going to be supernova. He is going to be incredible. I think that pairing him perfectly with Kristaps Porzingis with a whole season behind their belts, I think that Kristaps is the most healthy he's been in a long time. And I think that that's going to be, well, that's still the most healthy he's been in a long time, Ishan. I think you have to realize that. Kristaps says his health is never good, Ishan. His health is never good. He missed
no timetable for his return, though.
It's a little concerning, but I think that Willie Cauley-Stein is not the worst replacement. And I think that Tim Hardaway, Josh Richardson are really, really, really good players to complement Luka's skill set. I expect him to make a move for someone like Vucevic or like Miles Turner, getting someone in before the deadline to maybe supplement what Kristaps isn't going to be able to do, either not being on the court or just not being able to do physically. But I think when you have, Kristaps is going to play, 50 games this season? 45 games?
Out of 72, maybe 40 or 50. Yeah.
50 games. The question is can Luka take this team and go 70%? Or not even 70%. Could they win 60% of their games without Kristaps? I think that's an easy yes. And if they do, then this team's going 52-20. Because when you have Kristaps for 50 games, you're going to go 40-10. The question is can Luka go 22-10? And I think that's an easy yes.
Mm-hmm. And they do have a good supporting cast around them. Richardson, Hardaway. Actually, right now, according to ESPN, Hardaway will actually start at the shooting guard. Richardson will be there at the small forward. There's Jalen Brunson, who is a very good backup point guard. Tyrell Terry, someone that me and you loved coming out of Stanford. Josh Green, their first-round draft pick. Dorian Finney-Smith, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber.
Cauley-Stein.
Oh, and Boban.
Boban, yeah. Dude, is there a player more loved than Boban in the league?
Taco?
Ooh, that's close. Boban's more personable, though.
Yeah, because you've seen that. You've probably seen the clip of Brad Stevens letting Taco into the game. He's hyping up the crowd, chanting Taco. I love that clip. It's so wholesome. But that leads us to our last team, the LA Lakers. Is there really a question about them being the best team in the West or just being the best team in the NBA? The rich got richer.
That's exactly what I said in the article that you can get at trollthreadpodcast.com. I mean, they lost Dwight Howard and DeMarcus Cousins, but he never played, so it doesn't really matter. And they
And
cut him halfway
Rondo.
through the season, and Rondo. But Schroeder's an improvement. Gasol's an improvement. They bring in Montrezl Harrell, and they get Talon Horton-Tucker, who is pretty much a offseason addition. And the fact is that this team last season won it all with, as much as we all love him, Caruso played way too many minutes for a player as Caruso's talent.
Yeah.
Caruso should be playing, 10 minutes a game? 10 to 15? He's playing 20.
Yeah.
Caruso is going to have he's a solid depth. He's solid depth. The only problem that you're going to look at this team is shooting. They lost their only really good shooter in Danny Green. And, I mean, this team has the best front court. And I've never seen as much front court depth as they have. LeBron, AD, Gasol, Harrell, Morris, and Kuzma. I mean, that's just surplus. The question you're going to look at is their backcourt depth. You got Braun. It's going to be mainly Braun and Dennis Schroeder. And then
Wes Matthews, Alex Caruso. Oh, Quinn Cook, too.
Oh, they brought Quinn Cook back. I did like him a lot.
They brought Wes Matthews. And then Tom Horton-Tucker. I don't know if he's going to play the shooting guard or small forward position.
I'm thinking the 3, probably.
Yeah, he's looking more like a 3, especially if they move on from Kyle Kuzma.
Which they should do for a shooter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think Kyle Kuzma is still a young player. He's still on his rookie deal, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he's affordable. And he could make an impact similar to, Brandon Ingram or Lonzo Ball or Julius Randle, where he gets better outside of the Lakers. And I think there are teams that could sacrifice a shooter for that.
I mean, there's a lot of teams that you could do that with. I mean, one example, you have George Hill. I mean, George Hill for Kuzma is not a great trade. They have enough picks to make it work, but the Thunder could easily go out and get Kyle Kuzma. What other teams have good shooters? Joe Ingles would be an option. I don't know if they'd want to trade within the West to a contending team. Buddy Hield easily.
They still want to make a playoff push.
Kuzma for Buddy Hield. I don't know whose contract you'd balance that with, but you could easily try to make that work.
You could go Kuzma. Ooh. I wonder if they have any exception. There might be some trade exception that they can throw in. I don't know exactly what, but something there.
Their contracts are really, really ridiculous. It's either all the money or none of the money. So this team is great. They have the best roster and they have the best duo that the NBA, I don't know, is AD and LeBron the best duo the NBA's ever seen? Because this is 2 top 10 talents on the same team.
No. I am way too. It's been 1 year together. From a talent perspective, they're up there, but from best duo we've ever seen, remember, there's Jordan and Pippen, the greatest player of all time.
I said top 10 talent, dude. Like, has there been a talent this much? Like, LeBron and AD are 2 top 10 talents. Maybe.
Well, then also Kobe and Shaq were 2 top 10 talents.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And even though it was a young Kobe, it was a young, ferocious Kobe who was still making a name for himself. Froby was hungry. Froby was very hungry.
But it is the best duo we've seen in the last since Kobe and Shaq, and that's not even a question.
I think this duo is probably better than LeBron and Wade.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Wade's a top 3 shooting guard of all time, top 4 shooting guard of all time. But I mean, Anthony Davis is an MVP candidate, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate.
He's one of the most gifted defensive players we've ever seen. Like, he is truly insane on that end. But I think the only reason why I have them winning 51 games is just load management. They've had the shortest offseason of all time. LeBron's getting up there in age. You want to preserve Anthony Davis's gifted ability just because he has dealt with injury problems in the past. So I think they'll slip a few games here and there just because of, like, resting LeBron and AD.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, they're unquestionably the best team
Oh yeah,
You,
100%.
you look at the Clippers, and the Clippers have the Lakers numbers a lot of the time in regular season games, but they're not as good as the Lakers are. The
No.
Mavericks definitely are not. The Warriors, I think they could be. I think regular season wise, they probably could take it this year. Maybe they all are rested, so that's a team that might be the only team I could see taking the regular season crown.
You are very high on the Warriors, my friend.
What other team do you think has a better shot of taking the regular season crown than the Warriors?
The Bucks.
No,
You mean in the
the
West or
West, the
like?
West, the West.
Okay, okay, okay. Hmm,
The
maybe
Bucks have the
Denver.
crown every year.
Yeah, maybe Denver if everything goes right. Um, Besides like Denver, maybe the Clippers or Warriors. I don't really see any. I don't really see anything else.
Well, the regular season is not what matters. The only thing that matters is that you get to the playoffs. And let's talk about our Western Conference Finals playoff predictions. So
All
your
right.
first round matchup, you have Lakers Rockets. What happens
Yeah,
in this matchup?
that's a pretty easy win for the Lakers. I actually think it's going to be a 4-0 sweep, even though the Rockets are good. There'll be a couple close games, but I think the Lakers won't really have a problem with the Rockets.
I think a
Then,
sweep's a little bit harsh for this Rockets team because you look at the perimeter.
yeah,
I don't think that they have the personnel to stop Wall and Harden. So
but at the same
I think that
time,
they take a game or two.
they could, and that's what I'm saying. There'll be close games, but LeBron and AD on the interior,
I mean, Chris Wood and DeMarcus can do a better job than whatever Quinn Cook and Schroeder and LeBron can take on with Wall and Harden.
I just think that this, but also you have to think of Harrell and Gasol and just the versatility that LeBron and AD offer. I think that AD will play some significant perimeter defense minutes, and Horton Tucker, I think he could be an X factor in the series. That's crazy to say, but he's such a talented player. And coming out of college, he reminded me of like Draymond Green, but at the guard spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I had him at 17 in my draft rankings. Or
Yeah.
not in my draft rankings, but I had him going 17. So very high on him. I think Talon Horton Tucker is a great player. So
Mm-hmm.
I was disappointed to see him get a little minutes last season, but I think that we're all
That's gonna
happy that he's
change.
getting the hype this season. But
Like
that's your
LeBron
first
was
round.
really hyped about him.
I mean, if I had a guy
So
like Talon Horton Tucker as a role player on my team, I'd be ecstatic.
yeah. Clippers Pelicans. As much as we like the Pelicans, even I like the Pelicans. I know you're a New Orleans sports fan.
It's the
So
postseason. The Clippers are going to win the series.
yeah. Kawhi in the postseason is just a different breed, and I can't really see anyone defensively stopping Kawhi. Even if Paul George has his struggles, which could very well happen, I see the Clippers taking this one.
It's just crazy to think that you'd say a first-year head coach has a coaching advantage over one of the better teams in the West.
Yeah. But for you, you had the Lakers and Clippers as your number 1-8 type matchup. And you had them winning 4-2. You had the Lakers winning 4-2. Do you see Paul George struggling, and do you think Kawhi, like, how, to what extent will Kawhi excel in the series?
I think the reason is they lose the series is not because of playoff P. I think the reason they lose the series is because of end of the season fatigue. Because this team is the 8th seed, they had to fight hard at the end of the year to have the playoff spot. In my opinion, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is a really harsh thing on the Clippers. So we will look back at this, and I will be wrong on the Clippers. I know that. I probably accepted that. But in this scenario, the Clippers are tired. The Lakers are fresh. They've been able to low manage at the end of the season. And Kawhi and Paul George make this series closer than it probably should be. If both teams are on a neutral playing site, I think the Clippers win this series because the Clippers have had the Lakers' numbers. And I don't think anyone can question them. The Clippers have had the Lakers' number. So if both of these teams are both healthy and both same energy levels, I think the Clippers win. But combining the Lakers great in regular season and able to rest their players, and the Clippers not having that luxury towards the end of the year, I think that this is the Lakers series.
Mm-hmm. And then your 2-7 is Mavs and Pelicans. And I actually agree with you on the Mavs getting bounced in the first round. Not to this extent, but you have your New Orleans Pelicans upsetting them.
I
That's
do.
exciting.
I think it's going to be a very close series, but I don't see Porzingis, if healthy, and Cauley Stein being able to contain what the Pelicans have in the interior. And I think
I
that
agree.
Bledsoe, a combination of Bledsoe, Hard, and Lonzo, can easily limit Luka to 20 something points a game instead of 30. I think that the Pelicans are a matchup nightmare for this Mavs team. They really are. I think these teams match up brilliantly for the Pelicans. I think this is a matchup that they would be loving to see in real life. If this happens in real life, I'd be super excited because this is the most winnable series of any playoff team for the Pelicans, in my opinion. And I
I
think
agree.
that they got lucky here. And we've seen this. When the Pelicans have a matchup they like, they take it. Portland 4-0. They swept the Trailblazers. So the Pelicans, I think, it's a tough series because the Mavs are so good with Luka Doncic. But I think ultimately they don't have the facilities to stop. I think defense wins out, and the Pelicans right now have a better defense, and they just match up better. So it's a little bit of a biased win, but I think that you'd agree with me that the Pelicans would win the series.
Yeah, I would too. And I think yeah, the Clippers are a much better team against the Pelicans. And I think that the Mavericks are definitely going to be an easier team to face than the Clippers. But I do have the Mavericks losing here in my 3-6 matchup with the Trailblazers. I think once again, we don't know the status of Kristaps come playoff time. And Enes Kanter, Yusuf Nurkic, Covington, Melo, all that pressure on Willie Cauley-Stein, I think he will collapse there. I think that Covington and Derek Jones Jr.'s defense will kind of eliminate a lot of the wing presence with Josh Richardson's limited offensive skill set and the fact that Josh Green is still a rookie and the fact that Tim Hardaway can be inconsistent at times. And then on top of that, the absolute shooting and scoring barrage that you can get from Lillard, McCollum, Gary Trent, what's his name, Rodney Hood, and even Anthony Simons, and hell, even Melo will be too much for the Mavericks defense to contain. And then I think Luka individually will do great in the series, but I think that the Trailblazers will want that. They'll want Luka to do well, but they'll effectively shut out the rest of his supporting cast. And with a team this deep, like the Trailblazers, Luka cannot win a series by himself.
I think that's a fair point. I would agree with the Blazers would win this series when fully healthy. I mean, again, it's a matchup that they can't take defensively. And this is a one-man team, like we see with the Bucks in the postseason. When you have a team with one superstar MVP type player, it rarely works out for you in the playoffs. And when you have to cover a barrage of great depth on the wings, I think this is just a series that they just can't take.
Yeah.
So
And then,
my 3-6 matchup
yeah.
is Warriors Rockets, and this will be the best series of the first round in my opinion. I really want to make the Rockets win this series because the Rockets have been the Warriors' play toy in the playoffs, and they've beat them every year, and the Rockets want to win. If James Harden wants to be motivated for a series, it's going to be this one. But I just see Steph Curry being too good, and I think that overall they have more talent. I mean, I don't want to take what their new coach Silas, the
Yeah, Steven Silas, yeah.
Silas. I think Silas is a fine coach, but Steve Kerr's a better coach. They've got better personnel and they've got much more depth. And I think that's where this team shines. And I think that the Warriors, with more experience in the playoffs, will be the better team, and it'll be a great series. This will be a very entertaining back and
It'll
forth
be a
series.
shootout, yeah. So, the last series in the Western Conference, we have the same teams and the same outcome. We have the Suns beating the Nuggets. You have them beating them in 6. I have them beating them in 7. Pretty similar. I think that Chris Paul will be hungry. He has a better supporting cast that now has experience in a more high pressure situation with the bubble. And I think that they'll be able to pick apart this Nuggets team who lost their big interior presences in Plumlee and Jeremy Grant, and I think DeAndre Ayton's going to be the big X factor here on the inside. I think that he's so strong, so athletic, and just an absolute monster. It's going to be tough for Jokic to contain him.
I would say the same things. I think the Suns win this series. I think they have a better personnel, better coaching. I mean, Mike Lowe's on his slash coach wise, but I
Not at
think
all.
I think that this team is built for the postseason. And we saw this last season. They didn't get the opportunity to, but they were lights out. And I think that I don't know. I like the Suns team. I think it's a narrative that's going to just be pushed throughout the season. And I think a 4-2 series win is likely for them. So moving on, second round, Lakers Suns. This is where the Cinderella story comes to an end. They're
Oh, we
playing
had
the
the exact
Lakers.
same outcome too, 4-2.
Yeah, it's not look doesn't look great for the Suns in this matchup. They don't have the ability to stop AD and LeBron. So
Mm-hmm. Now, this is where we have some differences, or kind of differences. The Warriors beating the Pelicans, you have them winning 4-2. I think that this kind of speaks for itself. As talented as the Pelicans are, Steph Curry has the experience. Steve Kerr has, I think, actually the coaching advantage here. And I think that the supporting cast is better geared for the playoffs.
um, I'd say so too. I mean, I predicted a 4-2 series win. This is kind of like how the Pelicans played against the Warriors in that 2017 playoff run. I mean, they had a great series win, but going up against the Warriors, a team like this, they just can't compete. Warriors have more experience. They know what to do in the playoffs. The Pelicans will be happy with a playoff appearance, let alone the playoff series win. So they can build from this going forward. But right now, the Warriors win this series. So I have Warriors, Lakers in the conference finals. Let's finish off your matchup. You have Clippers, Trailblazers.
So when I was writing the article, oh yeah, by the way, all this is in the article. If you want to read it, check it out, triplethreatpodcast.com, link in the description. But when I was writing the article, at first I had the Trailblazers winning in 7. I'm like, yeah, the Trailblazers, the Cinderella story, the big upset here against the Clippers, and the Clippers curse remains intact. But then I just thought about it. Who is going to stop Kawhi? And who is really going to stop Paul George? Because Utah, and when Paul George was on OKC, Utah had one of the best team defenses in the NBA, and they were able to shut down Paul George. And then Denver's team defense was pretty good, and they had guys that could, stop Paul George. But with the Trailblazers, Covington and Derek Jones, as good as they are, I see them effectively shutting down maybe one of the two, but the other one's just going to pop off. And I think that Kawhi is so hard to stop and so hard to contain. He'll be able to shut down CJ and the wings on defense, but I don't think CJ or any of the other wings on the Trailblazers will be able to contain him on the offensive end. He's just that good.
I agree. The Clippers team is just more talent-wise better. I think a lot of this is going to go down to Damian Lillard, and Kawhi Leonard is the best perimeter defender in the league, and I think that he will be able to limit Damian's impact significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
think
Paul
that
George, defender too.
yeah, but Kawhi is
Kawhi's on another level.
Kawhi is number one, while Paul George is like top 10.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you have the LA finals. I have the old
Cali
dynasty versus the new dynasty.
Yeah.
Lakers, Warriors. And I'll be honest here, the Lakers will probably win this series, but I didn't want the Lakers to play. I didn't want them in the championship game again. So
NorCal versus
let,
SoCal.
let's pretend that James Wiseman can be a great rim defender here and just they can't stop the wings because the Warriors have a huge wing advantage over the Lakers. I know the Lakers have a incredible advantage with AD and Bron in the paint, but we're just gonna say this is the shooting series. It's about pace, and the Warriors win. So we're gonna gloss over the details there and just say the Warriors won.
Look, that could happen.
It could happen, but
The Warriors. But looking back at the 2015 NBA Finals, the Warriors did not deserve to win that. That should have been the Cavs going back to back. And why I say that is LeBron willed a weak Cavs team with Anderson Varejao. You remember him as their second leading scorer. to a 6-game series against a 65-1 Golden State team with prime Steph, prime Clay, and an all-star Draymond Green, Harrison Barnes, and pretty solid depth, and also great coaching. And I think that this Lakers team is better than that Cavs team.
Oh, that's
And
not even a question.
especially since that Cavs team did not have Kyrie Irving or Kevin Love playing. And this Warriors team is weaker than the 2014-2015 Warriors team. I think you can agree to that too.
Yeah.
So that's why I would have the Lakers taking them in a series. But the Warriors could pull off a magical upset given their experience. And then on my end, I have an LA battle. But at the end of the day, LeBron is LeBron. AD is AD. AD can definitely shut down Paul George. And
I don't know. I think that's an interesting matchup that I'd have. I wouldn't have that as a one-on-one matchup because
I wouldn't, but I think just given I guess I'm so high on Davis's versatility, I can see it happening.
but they're
But
probably gonna be playing George with the two. I wouldn't be playing my center or fourth guarding the two. I just think that sure you can do it, but it leaves the rest of your team at a disadvantage.
yeah, but the interior advantage with LeBron, AD, Gasol, who is a great playoff defender, Markieff Morris beating his brother, and Montrezl Harrell against his old team, combined with Kyle Kuzma, who could very well stay on the team, will be too much for a Clippers team who has Ibaka, Zubac, and Marcus Morris, but that's no match really for the interior presence that the Lakers bring. So I have them losing in 6 to the Lakers.
Well, you finished our prediction, so we can go into the championship game, the NBA Finals. You have Celtics Lakers. I have Celtics Warriors. There's one similarity, but it's not the Celtics being in the playoff in the finals. It's about the Western Conference team beating them
In 6.
in 6. Lakers 4-2, Warriors 4-2. Tell me why the Lakers beat the Celtics.
If you look at the Celtics roster, Kemba Walker, great point guard. Jaylen Brown, shooting guard, or Marcus Smart, shooting guard, let's say. Jaylen Brown, small forward. Tatum, power forward. What are they paper thin on? The center position. You really want Tristan Thompson trying to hold off Anthony Davis or LeBron James in the interior. I think that, once again, the Lakers' interior prowess is too much for the Celtics, who are paper thin at that position. And the fact that the Lakers have such a great defense, I think that they'll be able to kind of mute the production of the Lakers, of the Celtics' offensive talent. And then for you, the Warriors beating the Celtics. Once again, we have the Celtics losing. Why do you think that the Warriors will beat this really good Celtics team? Like, don't count them out.
I think that the decisive factor in this matchup is perimeter defense. And I think that you can get really good production out of Oubre and Draymond. And I think Draymond and Oubre can limit the great front backcourt that the Celtics have, because that's their big advantage, because they're not going to beat you in the paint. And I think that's the matchup that Kerr is going to really work on. I think Wiseman's rebounding and Curry is shooting, combined with Oubre and Draymond limiting the production of Green and Tatum, really make this a matchup where Kemba Walker is going to have to beat the Warriors. And I just don't think that's going to happen. So I think that at this point in the season, Wiseman's rim defending and his rebounding, although he might be a limited player in this role, I still think he's going to be a great player and a very useful player for this team. And I think that Curry just goes supernova. I think that this is where the experience and the chemistry that this team has is just going to propel themselves to the chip.
So this is a very, very hot take, but I've seen it flare up recently. Do you think that if Golden State wins the finals, and if Curry plays the way he does, wins finals MVP for the first time, would you consider him the greatest point guard of all time, ahead of Magic Johnson? Because I think Curry has cemented himself as number 2, but Magic was such a talented player.
I don't think I would say it, but I'm not a person that would be in a position to say that, because I never watched Magic Johnson. As someone who's only watched Steph Curry play live and play on TV, I think that I wouldn't be the person to say it. I'd be like, oh, I love Steph Curry. He's great. But I don't think I have the ability to say, oh, he's better than Magic Johnson because, one, I didn't watch the NBA then. I think you'd have to ask somebody. You have to ask somebody who watched them both or has done the research on the NBA during Magic Johnson's era and Steph Curry's era and talking about how that relates. But I think that he definitely would make a conversation for himself. If he wins MVP, finals MVP, and carries the team to a championship, you start to have the conversation. And I think that it becomes the LeBron Jordan debate. Because you look at both of them, they are both great in their own minds. They are great in their own rights. They both controlled their decade, and they both have had incredible success. It comes up to personal preference and a lot of the time age. And even though I never watched Jordan in person, I've seen enough Jordan to know that Jordan is the greatest of all time. So I think that you start to have a Michael Jordan, LeBron James type debate with those two guys.
Well said. So that concludes our Western Conference predictions. A little bit longer and, in my opinion, a lot more fun than the Eastern Conference. Go check out the Eastern Conference one if you haven't. And to see both of our predictions online, go check out triplethreatpodcast.com. Over Christmas break, we'll be dropping a lot of podcasts. Both of us are, off school, and we have a bunch of time on our hands and a bunch of ideas. So stay tuned for that. And then also, I plan on writing a couple articles too. I think you will too. Some NFL content. We haven't really seen that in a while.
I don't think Triple Threat Podcast or TripleThreatPodcast.com has any NFL content, but as the chief NFL personality of this duo, I will make sure to get some NFL love on the website.
Totally. So that's it for this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out the website and the rest of the podcast, and we will see you later.